everyone knows is that not everybody is able to join today, and we assume that there will be future staff, as there are often staffing changes with so many different organizations. So this way we can have a recording for those who missed and those who join later.
Okay, I believe I'm sharing my screen.
Yes, we can see it.
Perfect. Okay, now we're up and running, and that let a few people trickle in anyway. So thank you so much for bearing with us on that. And if we have not met, my name is Brianne Bales. I am the program manager for the Homeless Contribution Tax Credit. And we are excited to be in our second month of being live with this program for this tax year. And so definitely glad to know and to work with you all on getting this program up and running. We're still developing it as we go. And so a lot of your feedback has been really helpful, and I appreciate your collaboration so far. Also, Kristen Toombs is here with us. She's the director for the Office of Homeless Initiatives, or OHI for short. I'll also be referring to the Homeless Contribution Tax Credit as HCTC throughout this presentation. To give you an idea of today's agenda, we're going to talk about some overview of expectations for the program, the current contribution and certificate process, reviewing that, and then looking forward to Salesforce and giving some updates on what that platform will look like. We're not going to be able to see it, but we're going to talk about some of the features that will be included. And then also just briefly talking about future plans, and also an opportunity for question and answers, Q&A. Those help to inform us and give us ideas on what you all need as the nonprofit participants in this tax credit program. So just another caveat, this presentation is building off of the one that we hosted last month on January 4th. So some of that information included there. We're not going over again this in this presentation. And so there are going to be some areas of the program we're just not able to cover in the limited time we have today, and we want to reserve time for plenty of questions. And on the question and answers, please just remain muted unless you're called upon to speak, or feel free to share those in the chat as well. Thank you for your introductions in the chat. Good to see everyone today. And I'll let Kristen go ahead and share about some highlights and overview.
Great. Thank you, Brianne. And as Brianne said, I'm Kristen Toombs, the director of our Office of Homeless Initiatives. I'm very excited to be here with you all. And I just want to give a special thanks to Brianne, who joined us just 3 months ago and has hit the ground, as I say, sprinting to get this program up and running from nothing. And so we know there's a lot to go, and we so value and appreciate your input and feedback, but really just thank you, Brianne, for all you've done. It's really exciting to see this up, and thank you to all of you for your input, patience, and partnership with this. So where are we? We are excited to share that a couple key things for you to know. So for those of you who had a homeless related project that was approved in the enterprise zone tax contribution program, tax credit program, those were, if they were approved and continuing, they were transferred over to the homeless tax credit program, to HCTC. So there was, we sent around an email with that back in December. It came from me. If you have questions and are not sure if yours was passed if yours did transfer over, please contact Brianne. You do not need to do anything. You do not need to fill out anything. Those were just moved over. Now, once we do move into our formal Salesforce database, there might be some updates or additional information we need to add to those. But for now, you can keep receiving the tax credits for those programs. So again, if you have any questions on that, but we tried to make it really easy for you, that you can just keep on doing what you're doing. Now, if you do have additional projects that you would like to have the donations that go towards that project receive tax credits, let's say a project that was not eligible under the enterprise zone program, but is eligible under the homeless tax credit program, that you will need to fill out the eligibility verification form for that. If you are a brand new organization, or you did not have anything active in enterprise zone in the past year, that means you are new. And so you will need to fill out that eligibility verification form and get approved. So again, if you have questions about that, go to Brianne, please. But our hope is that, again, we were going to alleviate some of the burden for many of you that are already existing for that transfer. Another key thing to remind folks of, that the enterprise zone tax credit program is run by our sister state agency, the Office of Economic Development and International Trade, or OEDIT. This program is run in a different department. We are within the Department of Local Affairs at the Division of Housing and the Office of Homeless Initiatives. So it's different agencies. We work very closely with our colleagues at OEDIT to make sure we have communication, but you probably are used to working with what are called easy administrators. We've been in communication with them as well. They're wonderful, they're amazing, they're a great resource. They are not running the homeless tax credit program, Brianne is. So you'll want to go to the easy administrators. If you're still in the enterprise zone for anything, you'll want to come to Brianne for the homeless tax credit one, okay? And you will not have a homeless tax credit program that is also in the enterprise zone. It's one or the other, okay? And the other thing, because of that, because these are separate agencies, separate programs, anything for HCTC is not going to be in that same Salesforce system as the EASY program, okay? There, again, it's separate, separate, separate. So if you have anything in EASY, go with EASY. In OEDIT with your administrator and with that Salesforce. If you're with HCTC, it's Brianne. It's with our current system that we have right now, and soon we will have a nice, wonderful Salesforce system for you as well. We are building out separately because there are nuances by statute and some improvements or tweaks we wanted to do for this program and take advantage of advancements in technology since EASY was created, and that's why we have two separate systems. Okay, anything, Brianne, you want to add that you feel like I missed there? Okay, let's go to the next one then. Thank you. Okay, we are working really hard, as I mentioned. And when I say we, it's really Brianne and some of our other colleagues. So, and so we wanted to share what we are working on and just to clarify what our roles then are, what our responsibilities are, our expectations as the Office of Homeless Initiatives administering this program. And then we wanted to share so that you all can be set up for success so that you don't, oops, miss something or think, hey, I thought Brianne was doing that when really it's you. We want to just clarify what all you as a participating nonprofit organization are expected to do, need to do, and we want to make sure you're set up for success. And since this is new, we thought it was just helpful to go through this. And as you look at this list, think, what is it that you need to know to feel like you can accomplish this, okay? So really quickly for OHI, we administer this. We are responsible for administering it based on what the statute says. And you can see it listed here. And as you will see in the statute, it mentions that we base this off of best practices for resolving homelessness. And that is determined by us at the Office of Homeless Initiatives, what it means by best practices. We also take your input. Hopefully that's been clear. That's part of why we have today and we've been meeting with you, is to take your incorporate as best we can the feedback you have on what's feasible within the confines of that statute. So that's part of the fun of our job, is to be able to juggle those two things. And we truly value both. And then ultimately our responsibility is to evaluate any organizations, projects, and the tax credits from the donations to those for eligibility. We are responsible by that statute to say, yep, you're an eligible organization. Yep, that's an eligible project. Yep, that donation is eligible for a tax credit and that was the right amount, and so on. So that's our job, is to make sure that everything is eligible and verifiable. Okay. Now on your end, we need you to help we need you to make sure that you are following privacy laws. So I know we'll go into this more around things like you're going to have a lot of identifying information on your donors and on those taxpayers. And so we really need to make sure that you have a clear understanding of what it means to have someone's social security number, what it means to have their full name, what it means to have their address, and so on. And we can provide some of that information, but we need you ultimately to know that you are following it and be aware of that. We need your understanding of how the guidelines work. We're going to do our best to spoon feed that to you, to provide information. But if Brianne shares, here are these policies and procedures that we are excited to be creating, your responsibility is to know what those are and to read those. And as speaking of that, this program is new, and so it will continue to develop. So just like you are here today to listen to us and share with us, we appreciate that and ask that you continue to do that so you can stay up to date. We will do our best to get the words out to you, but we do need you to be here. So thank you again for being here today. Part of your responsibility is to both submit those contributions from the donors and make sure you're approving them. Are these truly eligible for this? We need you to help us with that by taking a first glance at, yes, this fits within this program and is eligible, and making sure that you have the donor information. We need you to ensure that the certificate does get to the donor. And I think we've heard from a lot of you that you prefer that anyway, because you have that relationship and engagement with the donor. And then we need you all, this will need to happen. You are the ones who will do this, is maintaining accounting records to show that those donations did go to that activity. So if you have several different programs and some of them are not part of the homeless contribution tax credit program and some are, we'll need to see that that donation that got the tax credit went to that tax credit eligible program and not to something else. Okay, anything you want to add to that, Brianne?
I think you covered it. Thank you, Kristen. So I'm going to be going into some of the more specific aspects of the program. So contributions that are eligible for the tax credit, we're asking that those are entered on a minimum quarterly basis, even if a certificate will not be issued until the end of the year, which we'll talk more about the timelines later on in the presentation, but that's our threshold. You can enter them more frequently. So if you want to enter contributions on a weekly basis or more frequently than that, you're welcome to do so. But we're just asking for that minimum of a quarterly entry for all the contributions that have been received within that quarter. I also wanted to show you the contribution form that has been updated since our last presentation. So it looks a lot of the features are the same, but we did make some changes. So I want to just go over that with you. Also, I had a question about these tabs at the top, and I didn't really even notice them before. You can totally disregard those. Those are more for the administrator who creates the form and pulls the certificates or pulls the information for the certificates. So you can disregard that at the top. This in the middle, this form is what you would complete for each contribution as you're wanting to submit contributions before Salesforce is launched. So we've already had a few organizations use this successfully. And so if you do have a donor who wants to get a tax credit, right now, this is the way to submit a contribution for that tax credit certificate. So the agency details are here. You will need to complete that every time. And then this is where you would select the contributor type. So for example, if you select business entity, then the business details will pop up down here. So they're invisible until you select your contributor type up here. One note on the business contributor is that you would need to enter FEIN or SN depending on the business type. Some small businesses use their SSN as their business ID. So if that is the case, if you do have someone who has the SSN, you would just go ahead and fill in the FEIN field with the zeros there. But that's really the only special thing on the business. For individual household, you'll want to select social security number or ITIN number. As we've mentioned before, the full social security number is required per statute. So it specifically says the full social security number must be included on the tax credit certificate that is sent to or issued to the donor. And so that's why we're collecting it. We do keep it in a secure manner. We send it in an encrypted email if we email that out. So we try to keep the information or do keep the information secure for your donors in that regard. And so that's where you would put that information. The household information here, you would put the name. Spouse name is optional based on the couple's preference on their filing status and what they plan to do. They can provide that information to you if you want. They want the spouse name on the certificate. Address is pretty straightforward. Email is not required because not everyone has an email address. However, if they want the certificate provided to them via email, that we need the email address for that. Here on contribution, for example, if you have a donation of $100 you want to submit, you would go ahead and put that under cash, put 0 for in kind, and then the contribution date here. A note on the attachment, that's only required for contributions valued at $5,000 or more. So for this example, for $100, you would not have to attach any backup documentation for that. Rural and non-rural status, I've gotten a couple questions on this. If you hover over the little I symbol here, you can copy the USDA website address to look at the list of urban and rural counties. So that's the list that we're using to look at this designation. And so that's here. For a reminder, rural projects receive a 30% tax credit, non-rural receive a 25% tax credit. Project name is where you would designate where that contribution is going toward. So if you just have one project at your organization, we do ask that you would go ahead and put that there. But if you have more than one, you'll want to make sure that you're designating the project correctly. Down here, this is where under submission details, you would select your preference on the tax credit certificate. And we're going to go into these details a little more on a later slide, but this is where you would select the frequency for the certificate, either immediate, quarterly, or annually, and then with or without the social security number printed or included on the certificate that's emailed out, which we'll talk about that more also. Any questions? on this form. The donor driven, we're going to talk about that on a later slide. But right now, this is filled out by you as the nonprofit.
I have a question. I might be a bit behind because I wasn't included in the January 4th thing, so I haven't had a chance to hear that yet. But are we allowed to keep the social security number in full recorded on our records? Because I understood that you weren't supposed to do that anymore, but I just wanted to clarify.
So that is how a lot of organizations are moving forward, as in you are collecting it and holding in your records. And I think this would be a good question to follow up for next week. So I was going to talk about this later, but next week we're having a brainstorming session to discuss best practices for social security number and ideas that different nonprofits have on how to engage regarding that with donors. So that's definitely, I think, a topic that we could bring up next week. But yes, some have increased security measures on their on nonprofits internal databases where they're storing that information.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah,
I just want to add, Rosalind, it sounded like you said something about we thought we weren't doing that anymore or supposed to, and I think there has been some confusion, so I appreciate you saying that. So I'll just clarify, and I guess Brian, yeah, we'll go into that more next week. But so the enterprise zone tax credit program does not have anywhere in statute that says you must collect the full. So that's why you're allowed to do the last 4 digits. The statute, the legal language, the bill that we have to follow for the homeless contribution tax credit program specifically says you must have the full social on the certificate. So the tricky thing is, where do we and how do we keep that for generating the certificate and then properly storing and sharing the certificate? So acknowledging that this is a sticky thing, it's a very sensitive thing. That's why we want to have that extra time next week to talk about it. So fully acknowledge that this is something adds a little interesting dynamic to this program. We don't want it to impact you being able to have donors feel comfortable donating. And we appreciate the organizations who are trying to think through this. Brianne and OIT at our end have really been trying to think through how to make this as secure as possible so everybody feels comfortable with it.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Just to piggyback on that though, and it sounds like maybe you're going to talk about that with regard to data privacy laws. It sounds like if we're sharing any constituent information, we need contracts with other vendors like yourselves saying that you are also abiding by the privacy laws. So I'm hoping that that will be addressed at some point during this conversation or next week.
okay, yeah, we can definitely take a note of that. Thank you.
And I do see that someone is asking, is there there's a couple questions, I think, about an amendment for the bill. So I think that I can just speak to that. So if there was a great committee of many of you that came together to put this bill forward, right? I think Lance Armstrong, geez, Lance Cheslock. Sorry, I've been up late. We have had a lot of due dates for applications. Many of you may have applied to. Lance Cheslock from La Puente helped lead a lot of that, and he's on well-deserved sabbatical right now. You know, I know that group led the original creation of this bill and getting it through. It really will have to come from a group like that if there are any amendments to the bill to take place. We at the state administer whatever comes to us, but we cannot lobby or advocate. We by all means can help provide information to any of you should you wish to put forth an amendment. We can provide information so that you can have it written, you can make recommendations. But I would say that that's kind of something that as a group, the group that came together to create this I would say maybe it makes sense for you all or some version of that to come together again and discuss that. And if you need any information from us to help have an educated, nuanced discussion, we can provide whatever information we can to help you with that. We just can't lead that.
And I would add to that, that if you are noticing that donors are not contributing or contributing less than they did before because of the Social Security number, they don't want to participate in the tax credit program, then to make note of the fiscal impact on your organization. And I think that would be some powerful information to bring forward if an amendment is brought forward for next year. Moving on to the contribution entries, recurring contribution should be at least entered twice a year if they meet the $100 threshold. So if someone has a $10 recurring gift every month, obviously in the middle of the year, they're not going to meet that $100 threshold. So you can just wait until the end of the year to enter those. But we are asking that you keep up with those at least twice a year on that. And then donation eligibility, just a note that contributions must be made to your organization or an approved project. So I've had a couple questions about checks that you've gotten that were designated for the enterprise zone tax credit. As long as you can show that your organization processed that contribution towards an eligible project, that's what we're looking for in your for you to have those financial records in place. So certificate options, we had a question about this in the chat. We're trying to be as flexible as possible on the certificate options to meet your different needs. One realization I've had since our previous meeting is that the enterprise zones did things differently. So they had different requirements, different processes. And so we're coming with this program where everyone is submitting in the same way according to the same processes. And so some of you are going to have a few growing pains, but we're trying the best we can to accommodate your needs. So one of these is the frequency options of being able to request the certificate either immediately after the contribution is approved, quarterly, or annually. And so something to keep in mind as we move forward to Salesforce database being developed is that your organization will need to choose which of these three work best for you as an entire organization. So if you think quarterly works best for you, it's just too much to enter everything on a more regular basis than that, then you're going to have to communicate that with your donors that no, they can't get a tax credit certificate right away. They'll have to wait a little bit, even though they do have a qualifying donation. Another note on the certificate. So if you do get a certificate for the first quarter, it will include all contributions that that donor contributed on during that first quarter. Or if you prefer to have an annual certificate for all of your donors, then the annual certificate will be for all of those contributions for the entire year with that aggregate amount of the tax credit on the certificate. Easy peasy for when they're filing their taxes to just have that one paper to keep up with. So, but we're leaving that up to you as an organization to decide what's best for you. Another of the certificate options is the Social Security number. So as we already mentioned, the certificate does have to include the full Social Security number when it is issued to the donor. And so we're giving you two options on how to go about doing that. One is without the Social Security number. And so if you want the certificate emailed to you without the Social Security number, then it's your responsibility to fill in the Social Security number field with for that donor, and then give them that final version of the certificate. If that's what your preference as an organization, that's totally fine. We have one organization who has been doing that consistently over the past month, and it's that's their preference, and so that's totally fine. Some of you are like, that's too much. I just want to have it one and done certificate. So we do have that option of a certificate with a full social security number would be emailed to you in an encrypted email and sent to the donor and to you with the certificate attached. If the donor does not have an email address, then that's going to go directly to you as an organization, and then it's your responsibility to securely provide that certificate to the donor. And I do have an example here that I was going to show you. There are some minor tweaks to the final version that we'll have, but just in general, this is what it looks like. The contributor information is here. So tax ID, that's going to be, if it's a business, it's going to be their business ID here. And if it's an individual, their social security number would go here. Project, so this is the organization information, and the project names here would include all the projects contributed to for the period of the certificate. So if this person got this certificate at the end of the quarter and they contributed to your operational services and your capital campaign, 2 different projects, both of those would be listed here on the certificate. The contribution information is here, so the estimated tax credit and then the total amount contributed. Submitted by name here is the nonprofit staff member who submitted the information. So it's going to be someone at your organization, their name here, so that we can keep track of that. And then the certificate date there at the bottom. So I wanted to just share kind of a visual of what a certificate is. So this is the official certificate that the Department of Revenue would recognize. Anything sent from your organization, like an email confirmation or some kind of letter that your organization sends out, that is not considered to be the certificate. This is the certificate that the taxpayer would use when they're filing their taxes.
Brianne, there are some questions about frequency and if there's flexibility around frequency. I don't know if you can revisit that or speak to that. It looks like, can they be enter quarterly but distribute monthly or annually?
Yes.
Or at each one? I think there's just some flexibility or preferences maybe by organization or donors on what they would prefer to do.
So on the, if you enter the contributions quarterly, you would still get the certificate at the end of the year if that's what your organization requests.
Does that answer folks' questions, or does anybody want to come off mute if we're missing any kind of timing or cadence that you were asking? I don't know if I summarized the series of questions accurately.
I'm still a bit confused about this. So I'll just ask what I would normally do with the enterprise zone. I know I shouldn't compare, but I would enter every contribution as I received it. I can still do that. Yes.
Yes.
But I can't, because when you were showing us how to use the form, there was an option at the top of the form for how often they would receive their certificate. I thought, I might have got that wrong, but you can't do, you have to pick the one that your organization has chosen. You can't pick an individual one for each donor.
Yeah, I mean, with the current form that we're going to be using for the next month or so, you could technically do it by donor, but when we have Salesforce, unfortunately, it has to be the same for the entire organization. as far as the frequency.
All right. Okay.
So you have some time to decide which one you want to go with on that. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So Lisa asked if we don't submit with social security number, we can add it to the certificate. No, unfortunately, we do need the social security number on file with the state so that we can have that completed certificate on file with us as well. But if you want a certificate emailed to you without the social, that's what we're offering as an option.
So I'm sorry, I'm confused by that. So when you're submitting it and there's the option with a social security number or without a social security number, but you always need a social security number, you're offering to email it without the social security number? And how do we get it with the social security number?
We will email you the certificate either way. It's just based on your preference of which type of certificate you want. And it will be sent in an encrypted email for both.
So I'm
What
sorry,
would
I
be
have,
I'm sorry, what would be the reason for requesting it without if we have to have it anyway and we're sending it to you?
Some organizations didn't feel comfortable receiving that via email and having that go out to donors via email from the state, and would prefer to do that in-house. So we're just offering that as an option.
So what that would look like is you get it, you would add it, and you would mail it or do your own encrypt email with the social. If part of the concern was the donor not wanting the state to be mailing with their social, and they might prefer it from you. So it doesn't, as long as the certificate at some point has the social on it. We're just trying to create those different flexibilities and options based on concerns we've heard or potential concerns to try to avoid for donors.
I have a question, but isn't one of the options that we don't keep the social security numbers, and that there's that option number one where the state handles that part? Is that right, or am I confused?
Can you say that again?
Well, I thought that I read, I was looking at the FAQs, that there are two options for the social security number. So one is that we add it to the form, and then obviously we're responsible for keeping social security numbers in a really safe manner within our organization, or the social security number will be put on the form via DOLA. Am I misunderstanding that?
Brianne, do you, yeah, where did we land with that?
So have some slides on what Salesforce is going to look like. So it's going to be a little bit different of a process on that. And so we are going to have a donor interface with that, where if you don't want to collect the social security number as an organization, then the donor can submit their contribution instead. And so that's going to be an option as well. That's not in place right now. So I did create this document that hopefully is going to clarify a little bit, that I'm going to email out, that just gives the basic steps of: one, the donation is entered and submitted. Once it's approved, then you'll need to submit the contribution form that we already went over. Then it's the certificate. So the process right now is for us to send an encrypted email to you as the organization with the tax credit certificate. If the donor gives their email, we'll send it to them as well. And the certificate that's submitted to the donor must have the social security number on there. So we had a question in the chat about, can the donor just put their SSN on there? The statute does say that the certificate issued by the nonprofit must have the full SSN on there. So that's why it's complicated and we're trying to work the best we can. So the certificate is emailed directly to the donor. Now, if the donor does not have an email, then it is the nonprofit's responsibility to get that certificate to the donor as they can. And so I hope that gives some clarity as well on some of the questions that have been coming in. I do want to have time to go over what some features of Salesforce, because I think it will provide some clarity. And then we will regroup with some of the questions in the chat, try to answer those, and add them to our frequently asked questions and follow up with that via email. So I think I'm going to keep going with the presentation. So Salesforce is estimated to launch in about a month in mid-March. Salesforce, for those who are not aware, is a software database that will be used to track contributions, tax credits, and certificates. So right now, our workaround system is this contribution form that I showed you. It's kind of a one-way system. You enter it, we receive it, we send the certificate out. Salesforce is going to be a login where you're able to view everything that has been submitted over the past year, et cetera. And you're going to be able to interact with it more. This is a new database that is not connected to the enterprise zone. So you'll have a new login. You'll have a profile for your organization. The donors will need to be updated in the system. So if you had donors that were with Easy Program, you're not going to be able to look them up in the system at first. We're going to just build from scratch. But it is going to be good because it is an updated version of Salesforce from the enterprise zone system. So I'm hoping that you'll be pleasantly surprised or pleasantly pleased with that. So some things you'll be able to do. You'll be able to submit projects for eligibility. So if you have a capital commitment coming up in the year, you can submit that for eligibility for the tax credit. You can submit contributions. So including everything basically that's on the contribution form we already shared. And you'll be able to review contributions submitted by donors. Going to talk about that on the next slide. You'll be able to access certificates on there. So they will be there for you to access, download from the website. So this is an exciting feature that was not available when we talked last in January, that we're going to allow donors to have access to a contribution form similar to what is now available for you all. And they're actually going to be able to access their certificate. So if they do not want to get an email with the certificate, or they'd rather have that digitally in their just direct access to it digitally, they'll be able to do that. They'll get an email with a link to their certificate where they can download it from Salesforce. This is different from your access to Salesforce, though. They're not going to have a login and be able to see all their contributions for the year and all of that. That's your access. This is just basically a very limited interaction where they can submit a contribution and they can use their emailed digital key to get their certificate if they prefer that over getting it via email. Some things to think about for this is that your organization will have to review each contribution if a donor submits their contribution. So we're not going to approve it unless you say, yes, this person is telling the truth. This is exactly the contribution amount and it went to this project. And you'll want to monitor if that is eligible or not for the tax credit. And so this is going to take some processes and coordination for you on which donors are submitting their contributions and which ones are not. So this is another aspect where we're trying to be as flexible as possible. So some donors might be like, no, I'm not giving you as a nonprofit my social security number, but I would be willing to submit it to the state's database myself. So if they have the computer access to be able to do that, we're allowing them to do that if you as the organization want them to be able to do this, because some donors do not have computer access, and so this isn't going to be a solution for them. You're still going to need to submit those contributions for the people who don't have the ability to submit their contributions or don't want to, or if you decide as an organization, we're not even going to have this as an option. We're just going to do it all ourselves. That's something for you all to think about, how best your workflows are going to go for that. So some clarity on the contributions with Salesforce.
Sorry, can I just ask one quick question? I may have missed something, but if they have the ability to submit their own and we have to approve it, how will we know if they've submitted something?
You'll get an email notification.
Oh, right. Okay. Thank you.
And we will go over all of the screens and all of the processes with Salesforce. We're going to have another training on that. This is just some introductory information for you to get introduced to what the database might be like, but we're going to definitely have more training materials. And we actually have a few organizations who are testing it out now to provide feedback on some of the bugs that they are seeing. So thank you very much to those individuals from nonprofits here on the call. So thank you. Going back to contributions, so they can be entered up to 30 days after the end of the quarter. So for instance, the first quarter deadline will be April 30th. And that's when you will need to enter all first quarter contributions. As I mentioned before, certificate frequency is going to be selected at the organizational level. With how they built out Salesforce, that's the way we're having to move forward on that. Quarterly certificates will be available after the quarterly entry deadline. So if your organization wants to provide certificates quarterly, those will be available on April 30th for the first quarter, for example. Immediate certificates are going to be issued immediately after the contribution is submitted. And so with Salesforce, that is pretty much going to be super quick. Excuse me. Right now, as some of you have found, we're working the best we can on getting those certificates out for those that are submitting now using the form. But it's not the same day. It's taking a few days for us to get those generated and emailed out to you with our current system. But the Salesforce system is going to be very quick. And so that's good news on that. Before we go to questions, wanted to highlight next week, we're going to have an optional session, quick 30 minutes to talk with each other about the Social Security number and things that your organization is doing to approach that with donors. For instance, I know some organizations are asking people to call in with the Social Security number instead of filling out a paper form. Processes like that you find have worked for you, or you think you might be doing, you might be sending out a letter to let people know about the changes. That's all information that we'll be discussing next week. I will be taking notes on that. So if you're not able to attend, I will send those notes out afterwards via email. And then I'll also be sending a follow-up email with the recording from this presentation. And if you have not watched the recording from last month or reviewed our frequently asked questions, or you're not on my email list, please reach out to me and we'll try to make sure you're connected with those resources to fill in any gaps that you have. I already mentioned about Salesforce, how we're going to have a future webinar on that. Another point, we're going to have a program coordinator starting on March 6th to further support you. So definitely excited to have another set of hands on deck to support you all. So I know we have quite a few questions we're not going to get to in 5 minutes. So yes, on some of your donor questions on the donor interface, if you have donors that have the ability to do that, you can just point them to that. You don't have to collect the social security number. They'll enter in all the contribution information, their personal information, including the social security number. All of that is put into Salesforce, and so that we can generate the certificate with that information. And so that's the benefit of having the donor interface available. And so the certificates will be available to you all. So if someone goes into the donor interface, you approve their contribution, that certificate is produced. Yes, you will have access to that PDF on Salesforce if you want to review that. That will be available. And can we just wait and enter all once Salesforce is on board? Yes, that is why I have advocated for us to be able to, with our developer, to have Salesforce up and running next month so that we will be able to make that quarterly deadline. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to launch mid-March. Of course, bugs happen and things unforeseen happen with technology, so you never know, but that is the plan so far, to be able to get everybody in the system acquainted with the system so that you have time before that April 30 deadline to enter those contributions. Some organizations have been using the contribution form that I showed you in the meantime for those donors who have been wanting certificates now. So some of these questions on the projects, I didn't talk about that today. That was included in the January 4th meeting, but I'll review it again. So each organization has two caps, essentially two caps of $750,000. So the way the statute is worded, that first 750 cap is for your first project. That second 750 cap is for any additional projects. So if you have operational services under project 1, and then you have project 2 of a capital campaign and project 3 of additional operational services, those additional projects are going to have a combined cap of $750,000. So if you, it looks like we had a question, if we have 3 capital campaigns, does each have a cap of 750? No, they would have a combined cap of 750,000. So there are additional questions that we did not have time to get to. And so I'm going to compile these and add them to our frequently asked questions. And I know I flew through some of that Salesforce information, but just wanted to make sure that you are aware of what's going, or what the plans are. So I look forward to seeing some of you at the meeting next week. And again, that's optional, but hopefully it'll be a good time for us to collaborate on some of the best practices you have. And then, as I mentioned, within a few weeks, once we have a form of Salesforce that we're able to demo to you. We're going to have a Salesforce demo and training as well. So thank you so much for your questions. I do apologize we didn't get to them all, but 1 hour is there's a lot to pack into 1 hour. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Have a good rest of your afternoon. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording here.